Summertime is the season for road trips. Before heading out on the open road, MDOT recommends taking some time for routine vehicle maintenance. Check your tires for proper wear and pressure. Make sure your battery is in tip-top shape. Keep an emergency kit in your vehicle's trunk. And don't forget to check your car's air conditioning because this Mississippi heat is no joke. Download the MDOT Traffic mobile app for real-time updates on traffic conditions across the state. And follow @Mississippi DOT on Facebook, X, and Instagram.
MDOT presents the Extra Mile Podcast.
Welcome into another edition of the Extra Mile Podcast presented by the Mississippi Department of Transportation. I'm Paul Catul, and as always, joined by my co-host, Will Kraft. Today we've got a great guest, someone you might recognize from broadcast journalism, where he worked at WAPT since 2003, but he has joined the dark side of the force, as we say in our industry, and has gone over to MEMA. It's Mr. Scott Simmons, and you are now the Director of External Affairs over there. So, yeah, really a dark force.
I look at it as a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah.
It was wild, but the dark side would be the way to use it if you want to say it that way. But
right.
Yeah, no, it was just a great opportunity, and it really, after being a journalist for so long, it was that right time to make that move.
No doubt. Yeah. So, kind of talk to us about this new role. Obviously, there are some similarities between journalism and communications, but yeah, talk to us about what you're doing in this new role here.
Well, it was unique. It was when Director Steve McCraney approached me. I thought about it, and I said, I've been a journalist over 30 years, and I was always the guy in the storm. I was always the guy who stood in front of the hurricane when it comes towards the beach, the guy who covered the tornado, did the recovery stories, and it was just a natural flow. And I started thinking about it. If I wanted to do something different, now would be the time to do it. And so he and I spoke for a while, and I thought, you know what, I like what they're doing over there. And so that's how the transition happened. And for me, storm response, emergency response was second nature. We were speaking earlier before we started the broadcast about all the hurricanes and Katrina coverage and things that were just, pack up your bag, Scott, you're going south. So for me, a lot of this was easy to understand, easy to relate to, having covered not only the storms that happen, the preparedness aspects, but the recovery, which is so detailed and something that I've learned so much more about in my tenure now as Director of External Affairs. Is, good Lord, there's so many layers in helping Mississippians recover, working with FEMA, and getting that funding in and getting it to the people's hands who need it in the recovery. And it's been a learning experience.
Awesome.
Can only imagine. Drinking from the fire hose, phrase you've used quite frequently on this show before. How long now? So a couple months, right?
Yeah, actually, at one point I was working for MEMA and anchoring the newscast still on the weekends.
Double dipping there. Yeah.
Literally, I started April 7th at MEMA, but my last newscast on WAPT was Easter Sunday, and literally I said, I'm putting the laptop down, guys. I've got to start the other thing. But I was handling double duty, because I had such a long history with Hearst, which owns WAPT. I'd started with them when I was just a young cub reporter.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. Didn't realize it went that far back.
Yeah, I started in New Orleans at WDSU in 1993. And again, there I covered over a dozen hurricanes. And literally, we had a rule that I would cover hurricanes from the Texas line all the way to, say, Destin. Past Destin, we would typically not go down, but I would be the guy standing on the beach, and no, I would not do the Jim Cantori. Oh my God, I can't stand up. But I would be the guy on the beach. And in fact, I remember one time I was covering a hurricane. I think it was around Orange Beach, Perdido Key, and get a call from the station saying, Scott, where are you? Are you in front of a building? And I'm like, no. What do you mean? And I said, well, the guy from the CBS affiliate says you can't stand up, and he says he's in Perdido too. And I looked down the beach, and he's about 50 yards doing the, oh my God, I can't stand up. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. That guy went on to CNN. I didn't. So, it's all how you look at it. But it was always the thing that I always liked, covering the storms and disasters wherever it was happening, which was always the beauty of our business, is that you never know from day to day what you're going to be covering.
Sure.
The diversity was always the draw in journalism to me, is that, one day I'll be at the legislature. Next day I'll be covering a crime. Next day I'll be talking about public policy for education. Even MDOT. I did a lot of stories with MDOT.
For sure.
Certainly in the latter days before I left WAPT, and my argument was always that you talk about stories that are tangible and that matters. Roads, bridges, everybody drives over them, people care. And I would make that case for a lot of stories when we talk about bridge projects or road projects. And certainly we talked about increasing funding for MDOT. That was the bread and butter that I argued people can relate to. You may not care about a school board fight in Madison County, but you're going to care about the I-20 road improvements or the Highway 80 bridge replacement there between Rankin and Hinds County. And so I always like those kind of moving around type of aspects of the job.
Definitely. Yeah. And so you've been at MEMA for a couple months now. Is there anything that you miss about the old job? Or are you just really happy to you've done your time?
I've enjoyed it. I mean, I miss certainly being a journalist. I wasn't a guy who hated my profession. I actually loved being a journalist.
Sure.
You know, and so when I left, it wasn't because I didn't like my colleagues or the work I did. I really enjoyed it. I might miss a little bit of the adrenaline.
Right.
Of you're doing something one day and you literally drop your bag because you're going to something that you didn't see coming. And so it would force those neurons to fire, you know, and you're always thinking about how can I communicate, how can I relate the story, and how can I make it relatable to viewers. That was a 4-hour deadline. Typically every day you do an editorial meeting at 9:30. I was out the door before 10 a.m. because I wanted to get going. And so you would typically have the stories written by 2, 3 o'clock, but then you'd be live at 5 and 6. And by that time, when you finish writing the story to when you're actually on air, there would always be another caveat, another nugget that would come in that you would have to adapt. So the thing that I do miss about that was that suddenness, that excitement, adrenaline, and madness, licensed madness we called it, of the business. What I've enjoyed about MEMA so much is the public service arm of it.
Sure.
And when you sit at a table with a bunch of people who you realize they really care about what they're doing and they're really knuckles down, get the job done mentality over there at MEMA, it's been really exhilarating because we talk about how can we serve Mississippians. They talk about how can we get services to them and get it done. And it's not just a cliche. It's not just a line. Even behind the closed doors, that's really the conversations that take place. We were having conversations this morning talking about our response from the March 14th, 15th storms. And how we are still seeing, after almost 3 weeks of these disaster recovery centers being opened, we still have 5 opened. We're still seeing, as much as 100 people coming in each day seeking assistance from those storms because we had to wait so long for the presidential declaration to come in. 68 days was the longest we had to wait for such a declaration. But once we did get moving and once we got the green light, we were on the ground and we were setting up those disaster recovery centers, and we're still seeing people 3 weeks into the game still lining up, seeking for help of things that they tried to do on their own, and now are getting some assistance in recouping some of that money.
Good. Yeah, I think we saw the press release. I think maybe last week.
Yeah.
Kind of detailing some of those.
We're from the press side. We're definitely moving a lot of material because we want to tell people how much is being done with our federal and local partners. We always talk about federally funded, state managed, locally implemented.
Absolutely.
Which is the key to what we do. And in this right now, when we have our MEMA team working hand in hand with FEMA at these disaster recovery sites, it's all about geared towards that person, helping that survivor get back on their feet and get their lives back together.
No doubt about it. And you guys do an excellent job of all that. Every year we try and make this an annual podcast and visit with the folks out at MEMA. Such a critical role out there, and we sort of touched on it just briefly already, but as you mentioned, hurricane season is here. We're getting into it.
It is, and we were talking about Hurricane Katrina, which for me was obviously a very big occasion in my life, a big milestone in my career. I had been at the NBC in New Orleans for almost 11 years. When they first approached me, Hearst, about moving to Jackson to be the main anchor, my first reaction was, wait a minute, what? Then I started thinking about it, where I wanted to raise a family. I grew up in South Jackson. A lot of people think I'm from Louisiana because I was there so long, but I'm actually from South Jackson. And I started thinking about where I wanted to raise my children, and it was here. That was the key reason I moved here. Sold the house in Lakeview, New Orleans, a year and 3 months before Katrina hit.
Crazy.
The house got 10 feet of water. When the storm happened, all my friends from WDSU, again, the company Hearst owns WDSU and APT, they evacuated to our studios. We had to put them in hotels, as in Walthall, when it was still open as a hotel.
Oh, wow.
I remember some of them saying, Scott, I'm going to come stay at your house. And I'm like, I have no electricity. You have a hot shower and lights. I'm sleeping on my back patio. But during that era, it was so eye-opening because we went on the air for 6.5 days straight. No commercials. No formatting, no newscast scripting. It was literally the old school rip and read. They would rip wire copy from it, hand it to me. They would say, Scott, we've got an aerial coming in from CNN of the first shots of New Orleans. And I jumped on the desk with Norman Robinson, my colleague from WDSU at the time, and we started looking at those aerials. And I could say, that's West End Boulevard, that's Katina Drive right there, that's the Central Business District, as we watched those first images come in. And we would start at 10 o'clock in the morning, say I'd come in, and I would anchor for a couple hours at the time, and then my co-anchor, Joyce Brewer, would jump on the set. I'd take a couple hours, get back on the set, and I'd go till 10 or 11 at night. Our colleagues from WDSU, they'd jump on the anchor desk and take over. We were just wall to wall until our morning crew would get on. And so we did that for about 6.5 days before we started scripting newscasts, having rundowns. And, when we were seeing those first images of the Superdome, none of that was scripted.
Yeah.
We were literally seeing it as it was unfolding, and those heart-wrenching images. And as we look back now 20 years, it's hard to believe how far we've come. We are still working Katrina resolution projects. There's still one left in Biloxi, I believe. It's a water project that's still providing Katrina disaster funding to that municipality as they do infrastructure repair from that grant funding money. 20 years has been a long time in coming, and we always ask people as we look now towards the hurricane season, don't take it for granted.
Amen.
Because when the National Hurricane Center predicts it's going to be an active season or it's going to be a less than active season, I just tune it out because it only takes one storm. Mm-hmm. You say it's going to be a less than active season, but you get one hurricane that hits your shore, and it could wreck your world forever.
Absolutely.
Which brings us back to Katrina. Remember, that splintered the state. It went straight up the state. If you think only hurricanes matter to those on the coast, and I don't know if you guys remember, or you guys were younger, I'm sure, but here in Jackson, there's no power,
Right.
no gasoline, and it was that way for much of the center of the part of the state. It laid a wasteland in its path, and we spent so much time covering in the wake of the storms, the GO zone money, the federal money that was available to help people recover, because there was so much damage from the coast to the central north parts of the state. We turn our eyes now towards this hurricane season, and we tell people to be prepared and start thinking about what you can do. We like to say the first 3 days are on you, the first 72 are on you. Think about it. Do you have 72 hours worth of water?
Right.
If you've dealt with a Jackson water crisis, you
Sure.
you don't appreciate water until you don't have it. Have you got 72 hours of water? Have you got canned goods that could get you through in a pinch? What would you do if you lost power for a week? Think about your propane grill. Think about charcoal, thing like that. You can make it work if you have a plan, but if you don't, then you're going to have a hard time.
That's right. I will not say that I am the best prepper at all in any stretch of the imagination, but one of my favorite quotes of all time was the old Abe Lincoln, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. That's one of those situations when the worst of the worst scenario is at your door. You better have some type of plan in place.
And we ask people to start only thinking about food and water, but where would you go? Where would your loved ones? You got friends on the coast? Those people that have moved down to the coast in the 20 years since may not have a firm grasp of what a hurricane can do. They may have some naive, for lack of a better description, idea of what it's like to be on the coast. Reach out to them. Make sure that they have a place to go. Because remember, when we have storm evacuations, you have what? Contraflow.
That's right.
Which MDOT knows all about.
Definitely.
And that is such an important contraflow plan. You're going to have all these people coming up. Hattiesburg is going to become such a huge mecca because those people a lot of times think that they can evacuate to just an hour off the coast. Well, they'll need to come further north. So when you think about your hurricane preparedness plans, think about what are your friends and family going to do? Do they know where they can go? Do you know where you would go if your home did get hit by a tornado that could pop out of a hurricane, drop on your home? Where would you go? Where would your loved ones meet if your home got demolished and you had to have a meeting place? Have that street corner lined up, that uncle's house where you know you can meet. And that contact list. It's so important.
I could actually say that. I haven't thought about that in a long time, but I think, what was it, the mustard station things you did in high school, if the scenario, you knew where to go. It was just at least that far, right?
And it's important that you start thinking about it now because, again, we're just starting the hurricane season. Historically, we've always seen that the hurricanes get busier towards late July, August, September. But really that July to August window is when we see the most activity in our area when the Gulf waters are warmer. As you remember, we start watching these systems move. It's when they hit that tip of Florida and they hit the warm waters of the Gulf, that's when they build their strength. That's when they become so impactful. And so start thinking about that now, getting your plan together, and thinking about what your loved ones will do in the event that something happens your way.
Absolutely.
No doubt, and that's a lot of really good information. Scott, do you have, I know you guys do at MEMA, like a hub for resources, a website we can go to, or social media?
We have multiple platforms, which we are proud of. Certainly our award-winning MEMA app, which has everything right there at the tip of your fingers. It's the MEMA app, the msema.org, our website, which has just an abundance of information and links to people like agencies like MDOT.
That's right.
We have all these connections, and we're so proud of what we're trying to do through our MEMA app and our MEMA website and our social media platforms, as you and I know, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Nextdoor. We're Twitter, or X now as we call it. We're hitting all of these platforms at the same time because we know that so many people get their information so many different ways.
That's right.
And so, we're hitting them all there.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you're in those lower 6 coastal counties especially, please go check out the resources that MEMA has. They're great resources, and we really work hand in hand with MEMA and have our own resources as well, so I wanted to give that a shout out real quick. For evacuation routes, our hurricane evacuation guide, visit gomdot.com/hurricanes. You can download that for free. There's also a hurricane preparedness checklist there. So please, between MEMA and MDOT, we've got you covered. But like Scott was saying, please do it now.
And get familiar with it. Your websites, your MDOT platforms have access to those traffic cameras that you can access on a map. It really is invaluable when you're trying to, you got a family coming up, say, from Ocean Springs. What does I-10 look like, or 55? Well, you can go click on the MDOT camera, pull up that shot, and get a feel for what they're dealing with, and you can be a valuable resource for that loved one who's evacuating north. Hey, this is what 49 looks like right now, because you can look at that camera.
Exactly. Hey, we've got you covered for sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's lots of good information on hurricanes just now. Anything else kind of that's going on at MEMA right now that you'd like to shout out?
Right now, we're really hyper focused on the disaster recovery from the March 14th, 15th storms, and we have we're seeing as many as 100 people come. I think it was yesterday in Jeff Davis County. To one of our disaster recovery centers. We're reaching out to people because there are resources that are available and assistance that's available for those who may have gotten hit, finally gave up, waiting, and just tried to move on. There's opportunities for them, and we have links to all that at our websites and our platforms. If they need any information, they can certainly call us. And we just ask people that if you know of a loved one who may have taken a hit but didn't bother to go through the process, step up now, because the money's available for you, and if you qualify, it could really help you cover some of the expense that you might have spent recovering and dealing with that storm.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Very good information there. And we've got some fun questions, but did want to circle back a little bit back to the news real quick. So, I mean, you are a veteran. You covered a lot of different things. So, can you give us some of like the craziest, most interesting, or most memorable stories
Lord
that you covered
mercy.
over the years?
Oh gosh, covering David Duke as a reporter in Louisiana when he the Klan leader got elected to the state house, and I just moved from Ole Miss, not long removed from Ole Miss, coming down there, and they would try to tease me, and I would respond back, "Yeah, don't give me crud. Nobody elected our Klan leader to a state house seat." But I covered David Duke during his run for U.S. Senate and for governor, and reporters that were wearing bulletproof vests because they were afraid somebody was going to take a shot at him and miss and hit one of the reporters.
Oh, wow.
I covered Edwin Edwards, if you remember the flamboyant governor Edwin Edwards of Louisiana, who actually ran against Duke for governor and won. And the bumper stickers at the time of that campaign was "Vote for the Crook, it matters," because he was running against David Duke. So you imagine what it was like covering this almost circus-like atmosphere of a guy who was flamboyant and controversial, David Duke. Then there's Edwin Edwards with a personality and a controversial background of his own. So I was literally every day covering all of those. And then the federal indictments of Edwin Edwards' corruption investigation. I covered that from the first search warrant to the third trial. I covered the mafia's infiltration of the state's video poker industry.
Oh, wow.
If you want to hear that story, I can tell you a fun one. Literally, the Genovese and Gambino crime families had set up straw men to get video poker licenses at truck stops. They were filtering that money to the crime families. So some of the defendants were pleading guilty one day, and right when they had sentenced these guys, your sentence is this, I started to walk out of the courtroom to let the photographers know downstairs, hey, they're getting ready to walk out. One of the defendants, Jojo Carrazzo, starts walking for the door. And this guy's like 5'3", right? And I'm like, he gets in front of me in the elevator. And he's like up to my chest. And I'm like, what are you doing, little man? So we start walking towards after we get down, we start walking to the door, and he starts doing the fast walk. And I'm like, dude, yeah, really? So I just start jogging, and he thinks he's going to jog with me, and I smoke him to the door, push the door up, told my colleague, my photographer buddy, Tom, get him. Tom grabs his camera. And the video is hysterical because this little guy's trying to run down the sidewalk, and all of a sudden Tom throws me the mic, and all of a sudden we're running backwards. And finally he just looks at it like, I'm not going to outrun these guys. And he puts his face in the camera. I'm like, what are you going to do, little man? We go back to the front of the courthouse to do the interviews with his attorney. He goes, yeah, not many people would have chased JoJo Carrazzo down the sidewalk. He was John Gotti's driver. And we were like, maybe I should have rethought that one. So
sent him a gift basket.
Go ahead, Mr. Carrazzo, have a nice day. The exciting times in New Orleans. And in this career that I had, that I covered so much and just seen so many things, and those are some of the fun highlights.
Absolutely.
That's
pretty
wild.
good. Yeah, I can't beat that.
The craziness stays in Louisiana. And that's
Well,
where, I know there's some here, but
there's been some good stuff, but
Yeah.
fortunately not quite as flamboyant as that. But
We'll take
you
that,
think
yeah.
about all the governor's elections and the races that I've covered, going back to when Haley Barbour had just got elected, and
Sure.
we circled back towards Katrina, and I was doing live shots for all these networks, MSNBC or CNN, and people were asking at the time, why is Mississippi getting all this federal assistance when Louisiana has so much damage? And my response was, well, we elected the most powerful lobbyist in Washington to be our governor.
Yep.
And, Thad Cochran is the Senate Appropriations Chairman. That's how we're rolling. And that money that flowed helped Mississippi rebuild and recover.
No
and
doubt.
it was just an amazing time as we covered all of that. Because people talk about the storm, they remember the flooding that happened in New Orleans, but remind them where the hurricane hit and the damage that did here in Mississippi. The problems in New Orleans were caused by the failure of the levees largely that gave way, but we were the one that took the big hit, and our coast was wiped from the sand to 90, wiped out. So
It's an image I'm certain at this point everyone has seen, but just that casino sitting, on land, totally, that was just boggles my mind.
It is, and it being a child of the coast. I mean, I vacationed down there. As a kid, I always went down for a week
Sure.
with my family. That's what we did. And so I could always say that I went to Barisev's restaurant on the coast to eat. I can still remember what the restaurant smelled like. Gone, after the wake of Katrina, when the riverboat casinos came in and changed the complexion of the Mississippi Gulf Coast, and then when you saw what the hurricanes did to those casinos and changed everything. And still to this day, when we go down to do as a reporter, and now through MEMA, we see still so many vacant lots that have not moved or done anything because of the cost of insurance. And it's just it's something that we'll continue to talk about for decades, I feel.
No doubt. No doubt.
Absolutely.
The climb and the comeback has been great, though.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Paul, we can ease up on the heavy questions
Yeah.
on the man now, and just give the
Heavy
two
hit 'em.
softballs here at the very end. For you.
Okay.
These are the fun questions we do like to wrap up the episodes with. We obviously love to eat. We like to get out on the road and go around and see what's out there. We've got a lot of good suggestions thus far. So I know you spend a lot of time traveling the roads and eating the places. Maybe a favorite hole in the wall, somewhere you don't get to go very often.
Hole in the wall. Gosh, I don't know if you call roosters a hole in the wall.
Oh,
I've always been a
wow.
fan of
Yes,
roosters,
yeah.
and I don't know if I call it a hole in the wall, but I've always loved it. I'm a simpleton. They have a hamburger steak. They use ground black Angus beef.
Yep.
And I love that joint. I'm a big barbecue fan, of course. Pig and Pint's a good spot.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Fine dining, I love Table 100. And it's hard
Okay.
for me not to make an argument for them because I love the shrimp and grits there.
Yep.
That's my fancy spot. So
The wife had that last week. That was our monthly date night, Table 100. So shout out right there.
can't lose for
Love
that.
it.
There
Great.
we go.
Well, those are some good spots right there. The Pig and Pint, that's a personal favorite of mine. Good stuff. They do it right for sure. So besides food, we're also big music fans and public affairs. I know you work with Mikey Flood, world's biggest Fish fan. We love it all. Classic rock, that runs the gamut. But is there a concert that sticks out over the years that you attended? Anything?
I've been going to more country music concerts lately, and in part because the Brandon Amphitheater has
Sure.
provided that opportunity. I saw Hank Williams Jr.
Oh, yeah.
Love it.
Had to see Hank Williams Jr.
At least once.
because I'll go back. When I was a student at Ole Miss, I had won tickets to the concert. my friends from Mississippi State came over to go to the concert with me, and we had too much to drink and never made it to the show. So when Hank came a couple weeks back, I'm like, oh, I got to make it this time. It's just, if for nostalgia reasons only. I was talking about Garth Brooks. We got to go. My wife is a huge Garth Brooks fan. She's seen him 16 times. I've seen him twice. Whoa. But we were in Baton Rouge for the Great Earthquake concert where he did Calling Baton Rouge in Tiger Stadium. And it was so loud that the seismic equipment at LSU recorded the vibrations from the concert. I've seen some good ones. Pink Floyd saw in New Orleans at the Superdome, which at the time, I'm sitting almost ground level, just up off the floor towards the back. And I thought, well, I'm a little far from the stage, but if you know Floyd with the visuals, sure. And I was like, this is the best seat in the house, and it was just really great to see that. So, college, I was more of an REM fan. Okay. 10,000 Maniacs, I've seen them probably more than anybody. But I just kind of evolve, whether it be Bryan Adams and Survivor when they played here at the Coliseum back in the 80s.
That was wild.
Just bounced around. I like to say that I just go with the wind when it comes to music. And lately just a lot of country music. But, Luke Bryan was a great concert. I enjoyed him. So, I bounce around, man.
I love that. Yeah.
That's good stuff. We love country music as well here. So, awesome stuff. Scott, thank you so much for coming in and joining us. Hey, you did a lot of good work in broadcast journalism, and now you're helping out Mississippians in a different way. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We'll go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you to our listeners, our viewers for tuning into the Extra Mile podcast. You can watch and listen to episodes by visiting gomdot.com/The Extra Mile. Follow us on social media at Mississippi DOT is the handle. Follow MEMA as well. And we'd like to thank our producer, editor, Drew Hall, for holding things down behind the scenes. Remember to drive smart out there on Mississippi highways.